Welcome to Mysterious Goings On. We're going to get right to the show after these messages. You know, I love podcasting. I have since 2006, back when you had to use like a Dixie cup with string to make the thing work. And that's why I'm so excited that we recently moved Mysterious Goings On to Anchor FM to record our podcast. I gotta tell you, I don't regret it a bit. If you haven't heard about Anchor, it's the easiest way to make a podcast. Let me explain. First of all, it's free. There's creation tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or computer. Anchor will distribute your podcast for you so it can be heard on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and many more. And you can make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership. It's everything you need to make a podcast all in one place. I'm not going to lie to you, when I first heard about Anchor, I was a little dubious because I've been doing it the hard way for so long. But I got to tell you, it's very easy. Use a Stripe account. Get sponsors. You're not paying monthly hosting fees. The sound quality is great. The distribution is phenomenal. Friends, download the free Anchor app today if you want to start your own podcast, or go to anchor.fm to get started. Remember, you heard it here first on Mysterious Goings On. The parallels between the recent unfettered violence loosed upon our nation's capital by many identifying as white supremacists and the uncountable atrocities historically committed against Black Americans are inescapable, nor should they be escapable. To explore this moment in American life, we welcome Victoria Bond. She's a John Steptoe Coretta Scott King Award winner, and she's back with the final book in the Zora and Me Trilogy, Zora and Me, the Summoner. In this fictionalized account of the childhood of American author and anthropologist Zora Neale Hurston, the Zora and Me Trilogy explores the wonders of childhood and the horrors of coming of age in the Jim Crow South. Now, it's a mystery series, folks, and it draws on the reality of the African-American experience to tell socially conscious whodunits about how friendship and resilience can empower us all to understand and confront injustice, all while inviting readers to explore Hurston's own seminal work. Professor Victoria Bond, welcome to Mysterious Goings On.
Oh, thank you so much, Alex, for having me. It's great to be here.
This book, I don't read a lot of middle grade stuff, but I do read mysteries, and I found it enchanting.
Oh, thanks.
Oh, it's so rich, and it's so lushly researched, and the way you've woven obviously true things into the story. I just think it's magnificent. But let's take a step back if we could,
Sure.
because this is the third in a trilogy, and obviously I didn't read the first two. I just got this one, but I loved it. How did this all? What's the genesis of the whole Zora and Me trilogy?
Well, I want to begin by saying that each book in the trilogy is a standalone, and they are all standalone mysteries.
Good.
With the same cast of characters. So one interesting thing about this trilogy is that it's actually co-authored. And I think unlike a lot of co-authored works, my co-author and I, my dear friend, T.R. Simon, we wrote the first book absolutely positively together. And the second book in the series, T.R. Simon, it's called Zora and Me, the Cursed Ground, wrote alone. And then I finished off the third book, Zora and Me, the Summoner. So I just want to say to all of your listeners who are interested in writing, interested in collaborating, there's all kinds of ways that it can work out, right? So Tanya and I collaborated on this idea, but our feeling, our pulse for each of the books was a little bit different. So it made more sense for us to write the books separately, even though we've co-created and co-authored the series. So I just want to put that out there, because I think, again, it's interesting for people that have an idea, they talk about it with friends, how is this going to work out? Can we do it? I think there are a lot of different ways to collaborate. So that being aside, so Zora and Me, as you said, is based on the early life of Zora Neale Hurston, who was born in 1890 in Alabama, but she comes of age in Eatonville, Florida, which is one of the first all-Black incorporated towns in the United States. So being interested in history, wanting to show young readers this prototype of kind of a Black girl genius, there was so much to be gathered and explored in this really unique context of an all-Black town at the turn of the century. And for us, the mysteries in that respect really do take on all the kind of baggage of race in America, right? So the first book in the series is a murder mystery, and the plot turns on racial duplicity. And in the second book, it's a ghost story, but it's a ghost story about real estate, right? Who owns this house? Whose property is this? And in the third book, The Summoner, it's a zombie story with some business about the history of medical research. So these books use the setting of Eatonville, Florida, and they're really about this kind of larger than life spirit of Zora Neale Hurston to kind of give readers kind of socially conscious, historically informed little mystery stories.
And it's wonderful. You know, I think it would just be a little glib to say it's like Nancy Drew, because it's way deeper than that. I mean,
Thanks.
But like, well, it is, because she's. I mean, you know, after a while, Nancy Drew kind of got a little rote. But I mean, from what I can see, this is a deep, rich character, and surrounded by this tapestry of wonderful supporting characters, and one of them being the town itself, as you say, right? Which was, you said again, it was like the first all Black incorporated towns,
right? Yeah. So this is just, this is in part why Zora Neale Hurston became Zora Neale Hurston, because someone with her gifts and her talents and her spunk was born in this place where she was surrounded by images and representations of Black achievement, of Black safety, of Black prosperity. One of the plot points in my book, The Summoner, is Zora's father becoming mayor. And in this piece, the timeline is off, right? So I make it a little bit later. He becomes mayor in real life in the 1890s, but for our purposes in the book, I make it 1905. But her father was the mayor of a town in the 1890s. This is a kind of a look at Black life that I think a lot of people are unfamiliar with, and that I think it's often sometimes hard for people to imagine.
Could I ask, though, when did you come across in your life Zora Neale Hurston? When were you first exposed to who this brilliant woman was?
Yeah, in high school. And I think, that was really lucky for me. Someone gave me the collection edited by Alice Walker. I like myself when I'm smiling and looking mean and impressive. I forget the order of the clauses in the title of the book, but I got that book and I just was so inspired. I couldn't believe just the style of the prose, just this personality, just about all of these strange historical things. I just kind of fell in love, and I never dreamed that, 10 years later that I would end up co-authoring this series. So
did you bring it to Tanya, or did you both know about Zora ahead, at the same time? Or?
Yeah, well, this is part of my friend Tanya's genius, is that Tanya had just had a baby, and she was kind of at home thinking in big and small ways about how to stay sane with a small child. And also thinking about what she wanted to give her child, what she wanted her little girl to encounter out in the world as she grew up. So Tanya had this idea of Zora Neale Hurston, something not quite a kid's book, but definitely for children, not a picture book, but a novel, and she was kind of turning it over. And around the same time, I had just written a novel, and it was really bad. It was so horrible. It was a complete nightmare. But I gave it to my good friend Tanya to read. And I was like, look, I think this really sucks, but I tried, I don't know. And she read it and said, Vicky, it does suck. But when the characters are young, you have these young characters in your book. And when those characters are at the center of it, like those pages in your book actually work. So I thought, right. So she had this idea, and then together we had just discovered as friends, like helping your friends to see they have a talent and, in a way that they didn't anticipate. So she had just encountered that I could write kids characters. So then she was like, Vicky, look, I'm at home. You are hot, sitting at your computer. Let's try to write a book. And I think she presented this idea to me one night over lasagna, and we kind of hashed out the plot, that night. And then I went home and said, okay, I think I'm going to try to figure out how to start writing this.
Well, apparently it worked out because just let me just rattle off a few things here just to embarrass you a little bit more here, Professor. But John Steptoe, Coretta Scott King Award for New Talent. This book was nominated for an Edgar Award in the category of juvenile fiction. Zora and Me was also a Junior Library Guild selection, ABC New Voices selection. I mean, I could go on and on and on, folks, and just check the link in the show notes for more. But you just struck gold with this thing. Were you surprised at how well it was received, or were you like, no, we got this?
Yes, I was surprised. Yeah, because for me, I think for us, it was really an experiment. My friend is climbing the walls at home with a baby. I'm trying to learn how to write. And we're just two women that were like, let's pool our talents and try to figure something out. So absolutely we were surprised.
Well, I don't always just like quote reviews, but Kirkus has a nice little sentence here. It's a sweet, lyrical, finely crafted mystery and a testament to the deep bonds of friendship, which could also be about you and Tanya, perhaps, I guess,
Yes.
deep friendship, right?
Yeah.
I think that's great. And if I can be granted just a quick aside from the writing, because we do have a lot of writers who listen to Mysterious Goings On. So obviously it worked fine. The end result's fine, and your working relationship is great. And I for one have tried to initiate collaboration with other writers on some things, and we didn't even get to the starting gate because so many writers are so protective of their own voice. I think. Did you ever have any of those issues at all? It sounds like you didn't, but do you recognize that other writers might be going, I don't know, Victoria, I don't know if we could do that. I don't know if there's anybody I could work with.
Yeah, I do know what that's like, because going back to the beginning of our conversation, Tanya wrote the second book and I wrote the third book.
Yeah.
So I do know what it's like when you're not necessarily disagreeing on ideas, but you're disagreeing on how the ideas work together. And, for Tanya and I, it took a long time to see that we were really just interested in writing different books. We tried for about a year and a half to work on the sequel together. And we really had different plot points, and we would try to smash our plot points together, and the manuscript just wouldn't work.
Yeah.
And at a certain point you're just like, hey, wait a second, what is going on here? And then it's like, oh, you want to write this book about X and I want to write this book about Z. I think we just have to write different books.
Yeah. Yeah, well, about 30 years ago, Peter Straub and Stephen King, when fax machines were all the rage, they apparently traded off one chapter to you, one chapter to me. And that's rare. That's incredibly rare that works out. And though, you know what, I couldn't tell you what the book was. So maybe it wasn't that. Maybe it didn't work out that well. I don't know. But
yeah, I'm trying to remember.
Yeah, it lost to the sands of time for me. But so back to the book, and I'm always impressed with particularly a series where the locale becomes, as I said previously, a bit of a character in itself. And but that was where Ms. Hurston actually was from, right?
Yes. She was born in Alabama, but she grew up in Eatonville, and then she comes back to Eatonville, and then she dies in the area, in that part of Florida.
Right. Yeah. And I sadly did not have the the means, wherewithal to afford a monument for her.
Right. And
Yeah.
that's the Alice Walker kind of, the
Yeah.
end to the story is that Alice Walker, not only resurrects Zora's work in the late 70s, but also puts a marker on her grave. And
Yeah.
it's a very inspiring story, about ancestors and hope and legacy, and marking the greatness that has come before us that may have gone, unknown or ignored or dismissed for a time. But I think when I think of Zora, I think of someone kind of like Herman Melville. Like, I think of kind of like Edgar Allan Poe. I think about these people that are just these towering geniuses that over the course of their life meet success or don't and have ups and downs. So for me, Zora is kind of the archetype of like the great genius, the starving artist.
Yeah.
Because so.
Well, so there are so many, as I mentioned in the lead-in, there's some parallels, obviously, with what's going on today. And I think a work like this is vitally important, and I'm glad it's getting into school libraries. And I think it obviously should be, if not required reading, extremely suggested, recommended reading to young people. I think that's vitally important. Do you? Can I just read a quick section from it?
Sure,
If that would, well, some authors like Alex, please don't read, please, really, dude. I want to read something here, okay? Okay, this is early on in the book. Okay, all right, let me get to here. I had no idea when the territory of Florida officially became a part of the United States of America, but the country gained its independence from Britain in 1776. What America was for white folks in that all-important year, Eatonville became for black folks right here in America in 1887. We didn't have a White House, but we had Joe Clark's store. Almost every man in town worked or managed his own land. Every child was enrolled in school. Sunday morning worship was better attended than the juke joint on Saturday night. Eatonville was considered a promised land for colored folk. Prosperous and industrious, Eatonville was bound to become a source of anxiety and envy for white folks sooner or later. I read that, and my mind went to, I'm from Oklahoma originally.
Oh, yeah.
My mind went to the Tulsa Massacre, Black Wall Street. And I wanted to relate this to you. This is all part of the big question I have here in this comment when I made earlier about being in school libraries. Grew up in Oklahoma, public education. I wasn't in Tulsa. I later worked at the Tulsa World newspaper when I was an adult, but I never learned about anything about the Tulsa riots in my elementary, high school, any of my secondary education, nor in my college. I went to college and university in Oklahoma as well. It was only when I was reported to Tulsa World that someone in the newsroom, an editor, told me, I don't remember the context, but it came up, and I did not believe him. I said, I surely would have learned about this in school. This is too big. But the whole thing was completely obliterated from history forever. Was that ever in the back of your mind? It had to be, I think, to a degree, when you think about this particular passage I just read.
Absolutely. I went into this book with a couple of things that I wanted to get at, right? And one of them was the beloved community, right?
Yeah.
What would it take for a community like Eatonville to come together? And what would it take for a community like Eatonville to survive, right? And, history is littered with these examples of these types of communities, like what you just brought up in Tulsa, of being destroyed, right? I lived for a long time in New York City. Central Park was a Black settlement called Seneca Village, and it was destroyed in order to build the park.
I did not know that.
Yeah, it was a Black community of free people, so our history is full of these examples of small communities of Black people trying to come together. And when they do come together, when we have come together and have been able to be prosperous and be successful, that coming together then is a target right? So, it's people looking for safety, but then once safety has been built, then that safety is actually, that becomes the thing that draws danger.
Yeah.
So I was thinking about all of that stuff just with Black communities and historically what pressures Black communities have faced. The other piece that I was thinking about was just the racial violence, which also comes up in the Summoner with the lynchings, with mobs, which, we got to see a mob on January 6th, and I think it was jarring for people because this is something that we have seen in Charlottesville. We saw it in Charlottesville. But I think before Charlottesville, we hadn't seen white mobs a lot, on the news. So I think, reminding people that there's a long history of this kind of racial violence, that there are other communities that also get together to create a mob and perform, just the most kind of horrible violence, most kind of disrespectful actions that you can imagine. So, so I was thinking about this stuff in history, but I also was inspired to bring in the election piece of this book with Zora's dad becoming the mayor, really from 2016 going forward, after 2016. And I just found myself thinking, just like pondering, like, why do people make their decisions? Like, how do people translate their private angst or their private dreams and ambitions into the civic space? What has to happen in the privacy of someone's life for them to make a decision in the voting booth? How do we translate, our private selves into our civic selves? So that was also something I was thinking about.
Yeah, I would imagine so. It seems to me, though, the Tulsa incident was sparked by something that was very similar to the Emmett Till incident, which investigations have realized that it was trumped up stuff. But the point I'm trying to make is it just looked like people were looking for an excuse to lynch in Emmett Till's case, sadly, but in Tulsa to destroy the Black Wall Street in Tulsa.
Right.
Just looking for an excuse. So when you think of what's going on today, I have to say, I think there is, like you said, the way they translate their actions in the voting booth. And then when a lot of those people were thwarted in the recent election, they found their excuse, and then it was gas poured on the fire, and you've got all these sources of information that are complete nonsense, like QAnon. I think the point I'm trying to make is that some things sadly never change.
Right.
Do you have hope that things can change, or how do you feel about
absolutely.
it? Really?
Absolutely. Yeah, I think things can change. I think things are changing. Yeah, I think, around the context of the pandemic, right, has just changed how people view themselves in systems, how people are being able to work out, all of the varieties, the vagaries of our personal lives, and how, again, this connection or this link between the public and the private, with George Floyd, his murder, creating this outcry for social justice on the streets, people of every race, of every creed coming out to mostly peacefully protest this man's murder. His murder and this protest giving rise to, millions of people trying to educate themselves on the history of race in this country. I think things have changed this summer, actually. And I think things are continuing to change. I think people are more aware of white supremacy. I think we have more examples in our current moment to point to that help people understand what this is and how these ideas have so deeply permeated our country and its institutions. And I'm hopeful, I'm hopeful. I think people recognizing that something is not right and that we have made progress, but the progress isn't as far as it could be or should be, and that we should strive for more. I think that's a step in the right direction. I think that these books about Zora Neale Hurston that have to do with, medical racism and grave robberies and have lynchings in them, the fact that these books get published and I get to be on your show, I think things are changing. We just have to keep working toward the changes that we most want to see, but I think they're happening.
Well, and thank you for saying I needed to hear that. I mean, I think that this is what happens though. People they see all these images on television, on the internet, et cetera, and it just becomes overwhelming. And I think it can, if you're not careful and you don't employ your critical thinking faculties, you can start thinking, my gosh, this white supremacy movement is hideous and large, but it is not half the country. That's just nonsense. It's not, but it's a very vocal minority and a very dangerous to a large degree minority. You dropped on another overtone I want to talk about in the book here, which leads me to something that I've studied for a long time. There's a recent report from UNIDOS US, the NAACP, and COVID Collaborative revealed that just 14% of Black Americans and 34% of Latinx Americans say they have trust in the safety of the new COVID vaccine. For good reason. Correct? You want to elaborate on that a little?
Yes. Well, there's such a long history of medical exploitation and the involuntary use of Black lives to make medical progress, and to do medical research, that Black people, brown people are like, it's very reasonable to question, the marvel of our technology when our history has told us that our lives are the least valued and for that reason, the most prone to be experimented upon. So I think it makes sense why people of color are like, hold on, wait a second, this is fishy. At the same time, I think we do live in a time of marvels, right? I think that the misinformation and the disinformation that we all have been exposed to has trashed a lot of stuff that's good and great, like vaccines.
Yeah. Amen.
Whereas, a lot of the misinformation and disinformation we're exposed to has uplifted a lot of things that are bad, like white supremacy. So, I think people have to start grappling with how things have changed, right?
Yeah.
And we're at this time where like the science has been able to produce this vaccine. If people don't let go of the disinformation of today and embrace a future where things are different, then I don't know what will happen if we don't get enough people vaccinated before the variants take hold. So I'm hopeful that people, Black doctors, Latinx doctors, people of color will get trained, will come out to communities, tell people about it. There were, for years, there were these kind of campaigns in barbershops and beauty salons, around colon cancer and breast cancer. I'm hopeful that even in our very kind of strange, screen world because of COVID, that we are speaking to each other. I know I'm talking to my family members about the vaccine. I know I have a close friend who's a Black woman. She's telling the people that she works with to get the vaccine. She's telling people to sign up. So I think a lot of us as people of color are trying to be ambassadors in our communities and encouraging, people to get the vaccine, sign up, get the vaccine.
Yeah, that's tremendous, and it's just I think I mentioned this to someone, and they didn't understand the historical context as to why people of color would be a little hesitant, perhaps, to jump right in.
Mhm.
And now that makes sense. So I referred him to the Tuskegee experiments, which is
Right,
horrific.
right. Yeah,
Uh,
and
uh,
yeah, and in Zora and Me 3, The Summoner, one thing that I wanted to try to work out were real life Zora Neale Hurston connections. So Zora Neale Hurston, the anthropologist, studied zombies, right? She went to Haiti in the late 1930s,
wow.
and she wrote a lot of articles, a lot of essays on voodoo practices, superstition. And on one of her research trips, she gets a call and she's told, like, there's a woman at this hospital that is we think she's a zombie. And Zora's like, huh? And she's told that this woman died in 1917 and she was buried, and her name was Felicia. And then her family, put her in the ground, cried their tears, and moved on. And then in 1936, this woman has reappeared, and her family confirms that it is her. What happened to her in that time, right? Who
Right.
knows? So Zora goes to the hospital and she takes a photograph of this woman. And this woman is broken. She doesn't speak anymore. She can't really open her eyes. So clearly she's experienced some major trauma that Zora documents. So I was thinking of kind of the real life Zora Neale Hurston and zombies and hoodoo and voodoo. And, as I kind of went down that rabbit hole of research, one of the things that I discovered about the history of grave robberies in, late 19th century America is that Black cemeteries were robbed, that, dead slaves their bodies were put into barrels full of whiskey and sent to medical schools in Boston
Wow.
and in New York, that because grave robbing was such a, kind of a sacrilege, people said, hey, wait a second, you can't keep stealing our white people out the graves. Like, we got to make rules against this. So then grave robbers and medical researchers then started to rely heavily on Black bodies. And once I read that and thought, oh my God, like, so much medical research was conducted almost solely on Black bodies, on Black cadavers, on Black corpses. And the paradox of Black people being considered subhuman, less than human, but yet our bodies become the standard by which medicine and procedures are documented and recorded. It just blew my mind.
I was just honestly, as you spoke that, I was thinking the same thing. You're treated as subhuman, all these things, yet all of this wealth of medical knowledge was derived from this, which that it's sickening. It really is. And I think that particularly people who are not of color like myself, who had that moment back in my 20s in the newsroom at the Tulsa World, when they said the world that you've been told about is not completely not all the gaps are completely filled in your information. And I think, and I'm speaking for myself, okay, Professor, but I think that it's incumbent upon everyone, no matter what your color, to dig into America's history, because there's a lot about it that's not pretty, obviously. I still think it's a grand experiment, but it was based on the original sin. Enslaved people built this nation to a large degree through their sweat and their sacrifice, and it was a criminal beginning. But I am cheered to hear you say that you do believe there's hope, and you do believe that things can get better. And I guess it's an incremental thing, though.
I think it has to be. I think everything is incremental. As someone who, you write a book, you put together your podcast, it's like, it's all kind of step by step. And, you just decide on what steps come first, how much you want to backtrack based on where you are, and I think that where we are in our American democratic experiment, is that the past 4 years was some backtracking, but it was also kind of plunging into some unknown territory for the country, insofar as this, at least in my lifetime, I'm 40 something, but this is as close as I could have ever imagined us getting to trashing democracy, period. Throwing away the republic altogether. Like, this is a new thing. That's change. That happened. So, like, maybe we can say, okay, we didn't go off the cliff, but let's figure out how to back up from the cliff. Let's back up. Let's make some changes because we got this close, everyone.
I happen to think we're not out of the woods yet.
Yeah, I think you're probably right.
I have a 12-year-old daughter. We all, everyone, you all have we all have our children. We all want what's best for the next generation, how we leave it. But I don't know if I'm going to sleep well again. And I know that sounds dramatic, but it's just this, I was shook by this whole thing. I remember telling a friend of mine, I'm in my 50s, but I remember telling a friend of mine, I just didn't think it could happen here. What just happened, the sacking of the Capitol. I mean, a friend of mine who was driving and he was like, what are you talking about? I said, I'm watching it on CNN right now. They're tearing into he was like, you're full of it. I said, no, get yourself home and look. And he's in his 60s and he called me and said, I'm at a loss for words. But the point being, it can happen here. We were on the precipice on January 6th. I think we took a few steps back, and I pray we can come to our senses here on this thing. But I do think that one of the ways we can come to our senses is with the wonderful writings of the Zora and Me series. See how I brought that around? Look at you, Professor. She's like, where's he going with this? And I'll tell you what.
Oh, dude, I just like hanging out with you. You're just nice to talk to.
Oh, thank you. Well, you are too. Zora and Me is a Coretta Scott King John Steptoe New Talent Award winner from 2011. And it's also an Edgar nominee. And it is endorsed by, I think it's the first, or is it the only?
Yes, it's the only work endorsed by the Zora Neale Hurston Trust that was not authored by Zora herself.
Well, I don't know if it gets any better than that, But so then the next book by Tanya, by T.R. Simon, Zora and Me, The Cursed Ground, which was a 2019 Edgar Award nominee. I write mystery, so I'm very envious, by the way. I'm just telling you. I'm human. I can be envious for a moment. No, I think it's great. They're well earned. And then, of course, you have this wonderful book, Zora and Me, The Summoner, which is, I'm sure it just came out this year or last year, and I'm sure it's being entered in all kinds of award stuff.
Well, it was, it was not an Edgar nominee this year.
Was it the zombie thing? Was that what it?
Yeah, you just are like, well, there's so many great books. You just say,
Well, you got to give somebody else a chance. That's what I'm telling everybody about Tom Brady. It's like, move over because Patrick Mahomes needs to get his second Super Bowl from here for Kansas City. That's all there is, dude. That's all there is. So, Professor Victoria Bond, real quick though, if people want to get these wonderful series, where do we go? Amazon, I assume, with one
go
spot?
To Amazon, Barnes and Noble, the indie book. That's horrible. I forget the indie book thing, but I think it's called First Indie Book. My website is victoriabondauthor.com. Yeah, so there's Zora and Me on Facebook. There's I'm on Instagram. Way to go, Vicky Bond. So yeah, I'm hoping for a great 2021, and it's just been great to talk to you about Zora and Me, the trilogy.
Well, it has been great speaking with you, and I'm sincere when I tell you this. Thanks for giving me a little hope here. Your optimism, it really made my day. Thank you, and I will try to incorporate that as I absorb more and more of the horrific things that have happened, and just realize that there are really good people in this country. You're obviously one of them. So thanks so much for being here.
Oh, Alex, thank you.
Been there, done that, got the t-shirt, huh? Not quite Mysterious Goings On, listeners. You probably haven't got the brand new Mysterious Goings On official t-shirt. This is a quality cotton t-shirt. coming in a premium unisex tee version and a women's slim fit tee version in all the sizes you could possibly need. These are great quality shirts coming in a variety of colors, including dark heather gray, black, charcoal, maroon. And the women's t-shirt, we come in dark heather gray, black, charcoal, indigo, and midnight navy. There you go. Check them out. They are in the show notes. The link is right there. They're being sold on Bonfire. They're typically sold in batches, and they'll come at you pretty quickly. All the instructions are on the website. The link is in the show notes here or at mgopod.com. Again, show the world, well, at least show the world on Zoom, or show the world when we can finally really get out and about. Show the world that you have some mysterious goings-ons of your own by wearing our t-shirt, and help support this show. Thank you so much. Thanks so much for listening to Mysterious Goings On. Don't forget, we have a complete archive of all of our interviews, monologues, updates, live readings, dead readings. All of that stuff is available at mgopod.com. And of course, don't forget to subscribe to us so you never miss an episode. We're on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, all the usual suspects. Please join us there. Again, don't forget, mgopod.com also has links where to find me on social media and how to get in touch in case you want to be a guest here on the show. Well, I think it's time that I move on for this week, but until next time, keep reading. Hey folks, we're going to take a quick break in the episode. I probably mentioned here and there that I have another podcast called PR After Hours. PR After Hours is basically an after-hours virtual lounge where public relations, marketing, and general business professionals get together and have a laid-back conversation about what they do and how we can help each other. It's great tips if you're running a business, or if you're part of a PR or marketing team, or you own your own business. I guarantee you'll learn a lot of stuff. It's a twice weekly show. We've been doing it for a year now. Very proud of it, and you can get it right here on Anchor FM or pretty much wherever you get quality podcasts. But if you want to learn more information about PR After Hours, please visit prafterhours.com. I hope you'll check it out. It's a little bit different vibe, obviously, than Mysterious Goings On, but also I think if you're not careful, you might learn something and have a laugh or two as well. Thanks so much. Again, that's PR After Hours on Anchor FM.